turn and talk about Bernie Sanders. He's Bernie Sanders, the Democrat presidential candidate. He's actually slipping in the polls a little bit. He was, for quite a while, appeared he was the number one guy. He's behind in polling now, behind Joe Biden, and depends what state you're in. He's being challenged by Elizabeth Warren, and I guess Kamala Harris also appears in some of those polls. But Bernie Sanders typifies the American left and the ideas I want to talk about today. In Bernie Sanders' campaign, he is one of the most honest of all of the Democrat presidential candidates, and even, frankly, of the Democrat senatorial candidates when he runs for Senate. He is perfectly willing to acknowledge that his ideas fall on the political spectrum into the radical left Democrat socialist ideas. He's fine saying that, which makes him more honest than many of the other Democrats running who literally embrace very, very similar ideas, but they are smart enough or they're strategic enough to realize that may not fly in America, so they stick with their depiction of themselves as they are Democrats or they are progressives. But I want to hit on two things about Bernie Sanders, and then we're going to turn to talk about a conference that happened in America over July 4th weekend with a socialist conference. But on Bernie Sanders, a lot of you probably saw that his campaign has gotten quite a bit of bad publicity in the last few days about the issue that his own staff, he has staff probably in every state, but certainly in the important swing states, the early primary states, he has a staff already working for him as he pursues the Democrat presidential nomination, and his staff is unionized, like a manufacturing plant. His staff is unionized, and he negotiates with them. And he is suffering from the reality that his staff is complaining to the media. In fact, one of them wrote a letter to the Washington Post essentially saying Bernie Sanders isn't really honoring in our campaign this $15 an hour minimum wage thing that he keeps telling America there needs to be at least a $15 minimum wage. And so these workers are saying, we might be getting 15, but that's only if we really only worked whatever the number of hours is, 40 hours a week, but all of us work much more than that. And many people are getting something more like $13 an hour. So they're in a wage dispute with Bernie Sanders, compounded with they're in a dispute with him because Bernie Sanders' policy, this is the guy running for president promising free health care for everybody, Medicare for all, every single medical care issue you possibly have will be for free for everyone in America because we're going to have the government pay for it, which means the taxpayers pay for it. But Bernie Sanders on his own staff is not providing health care insurance to the people who earn less than $60,000 a year. His staffers, the ones griping about the minimum wage issue, earn something like $36,000 a year. They want to raise to $48,000 a year or so to essentially keep them at their $15 an hour wage because they're working more than 40 hours. Point is, Bernie Sanders has figured out that his crazy socialist ideas don't work. Even in the little microcosm of his own campaign, they don't work. He cannot afford to pay free health care for these people on his staff who are literally the ones who would most need help paying for health care insurance. He won't pay for it because he realizes it costs too much money. Somehow that hasn't sunk in enough to him, so he'll turn and then ultimately change his mind about this policy he has in Washington, policy he wants to bring to Washington of free health care for all. The other quick thing I wanted to hit on with Bernie is just remind you, I think that one of the most significant political speeches probably of his entire career was a speech he made at George Mason University. It was George Washington University. It was a speech to students in which he outlined what he stands for, what he wants to do. And Bernie Sanders finished this speech. You can actually Google it and watch it, or if you go to our website, americacanwetalk.org, and you go to the homepage under shows and go down a list of links, it'll take you to the transcript of this speech. In this speech, I'm sure Bernie Sanders' staff told him the most eloquent thing he could say, the most profound message he was conveying is he said we have to revisit, he said something true. He said we have to revisit the question, what does it actually mean to be free? Those were his words. What does it actually mean to be free? And he went on to make a list, a litany of things that actually cost money, and saying his question to the students, who are of course hysterically clapping and jumping up and down because they have no idea about the economic reality of life, Bernie Sanders was saying, are you really free if you don't have free health care? Are you really free if you cannot afford to take the amount of time you'd like to take off from work after you have a baby, for paid maternity leave or paid parental leave? Are you really free? And he went through list after list after list. They weren't just healthcare things. He taught, if you can't afford to go to a doctor when you want to, if you spend half of your, are you truly free if you spend half your limited income on housing and are forced to borrow money to pay for other things? He's saying to people, his argument is the only way he sees you, the American citizens, as free, truly free, is that everything that costs you money should be given to you by the government. That's his argument. You're not really free unless the government takes care of everything you need, which means the taxpayers pay for everything you need or want. This goes to housing and college education of all kinds. It goes to food and health care. This is a guy, if he were being really honest with America, he wouldn't really call himself a Democrat socialist. He's pretty much of a communist. Now, we have other political parties, and hopefully we could get rid of him someday if he ever were to be elected. But this is a guy who's running on the platform, the government should take care of your every need. Contrast that with what President Trump is doing, ran on and is doing, which is bringing more jobs to America, reducing regulation by the federal government so that more jobs are available to Americans, increasing the number of Americans working in every category, every racial, ethnic category across the country, increasing the percentage of people working who are then able to be self-sufficient, self-reliant. That's a great core distinction just from the very beginning as we get through today. The issue in 2020 is what kind of America will we have? What does America mean? To Bernie Sanders and frankly all the wackos on the American left, it means move toward socialism as fast as you can. Move toward government-provided everything, which is only paid for by government confiscation of the wealth of private citizens. And I don't mean just private citizens like the really wealthy, the people who are, able to, have 7 yachts and 10 houses or whatever it is. The everyday American, middle-class America, middle America would be burdened to death by the taxes that would have to be imposed on them to pay for this stuff that Bernie Sanders is providing for free. And that, my friends, is the Bernie Sanders, it's fake freedom, folks. What he's selling you is fake freedom. He already can't implement the policies he stands for when he's dealing with his own staff. So Bernie Sanders, fake freedom, don't get sucked in.